Welcome back to the Wealthy Good Life podcast, where we dig into ideas that can help us live, a really good life. And today we're going to tackle this question of how much is enough?
Really big question, isn't it? I mean, it kind of gets at the heart of, what it means to live a good life. Not just, having a lot of money, but like being rich in all the ways that matter, like purpose and meaning.
For sure. And it feels like, it's a question that's super relevant. Like right now, I was reading this article by Jason Lemkin. He's a venture capitalist. And he was saying how it seems like younger generations are, finding more happiness working less.
Hmm. That's pretty interesting. That does kind of suggest that people's priorities might be changing, right? Like maybe younger generations are thinking about enough differently. Like maybe they care more about having time and flexibility than, climbing that corporate ladder.
Yeah, it does seem like that. But, it's easy to fall into that trap of comparing ourselves to others, no matter how old we are. I was actually talking to my friend Mike. He's a successful fundraiser, and he's getting ready to retire. He's got a nice little nest egg saved up. But he was telling me he feels kind of inadequate compared to, his super rich clients.
Mike's experience is a great example of how our idea of enough can get messed up when we start comparing ourselves to other people. It shows us how important it is to figure out what enough means for us based on like our own values and what we want to do in life, not just by looking at what other people have.
Absolutely. This makes me think of Lao Tzu. Did you know way back in ancient China, he wrote in the Tao Te Ching about how important it is to see like having enough as true wealth. I mean, he even said he who knows he has enough is rich.
Lao Tzu's words are so powerful, aren't they? I think it's because they remind us about the importance of being content, feeling satisfied with what we have instead of always wanting more. It's not about like settling or not trying to improve, but it's about appreciating what's already good in our lives.
Okay, so let's jump ahead a few centuries and talk about Adam Smith. Most people think of him as like the father of modern economics, right? Most people know him from The Wealth of Nations, but he also wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments, which is about, the ethics of how people act.
Yeah. And in that book, Smith talks about this idea of sympathy, which we might call empathy now. He's saying that a lot of times our desire for wealth comes from wanting to be accepted by others. We want to be seen as successful and worthy and admired.
It's almost like we're trying to prove our worth with stuff, like it's a status symbol.
Exactly. And Smith was actually warning people about thinking that being wealthy automatically makes you a good person or a happy person. He noticed that always chasing after money can actually pull us away from what really matters, like having strong relationships and growing as a person and doing something good for the world.
So it's not just about getting rich, but about using our wealth in a good way and doing the right thing. Now, if we're talking about living a simple life, even with money, we're going to talk about Henry David Thoreau and his experiment at Walden Pond. He basically went off the grid to live intentionally and figure out what it really means to live a good life.
Thoreau's story is so relevant today, don't you think? I mean, it challenges that fear of not having enough that makes us want more and more. He figured out that by making his life simpler and focusing on what he really needed, he could feel truly abundant and fulfilled.
He like flipped the script on what being wealthy even means. Right? It wasn't about stuff for him, but about experiences and connecting with nature.
Totally. And Thoreau's writing is full of wisdom about, living with intention, consuming, mindfully appreciating the little things, ideas that are like super relevant now more than ever with all the consumerism and information overload we face.
Now, if you want to dig deeper into these ideas and find resources to help you line up your finances with your values, you got to check out wealthygoodlife.com. We've had a ton of great articles, tools, and tips to help you build a wealthy good life on your own terms.
It's a great place to start for anyone who wants to live more intentionally and create a life that's both financially secure and, personally fulfilling.
All right, so let's jump ahead to the 20th century. Now we got to talk about Jacob Needleman. He wrote Money and the Meaning of Life, and his work takes this whole question of how much is enough in a totally different direction.
Yeah. So instead of trying to figure out exactly how much money we need, Needleman says we should be asking a different question. What is money for? He sees money as like a neutral thing, a tool that can be used for good or bad, depending on, what we really intend to do with it and what our values are.
So it's not about the money itself, but more about our relationship with it.
Exactly. He wants us to really look at what we believe about money. Why do we want to earn it and spend it? Do our financial choices show what we truly value? He thinks that doing this inner work can help us make sure our financial goals match up with, our real purpose in life.
That's powerful. And it reminds me of Lynn Twist, who wrote The Soul of Money. She talks about sufficiency as like a mindset. an inner knowing that there's always enough to take care of our needs.
Twist's work is so important because it challenges that scarcity mindset that's everywhere in our culture, right? That feeling of not having enough. She separates real scarcity, which is like not having basic necessities, from perceived scarcity, which is that feeling of lack, even when you have more than enough.
So it's not just about what we have materially, but about what's going on in our minds.
Right. She wants us to build a consciousness of sufficiency, to believe that the universe will provide for us, and to shift our focus from what we don't have to what we do have. She also talks about seeing money as a flow, something that moves through our lives instead of something we need to hoard and protect.
Now let's hear from someone with a completely different perspective. Mark C. Taylor. He's a philosopher who wrote Confidence Games, Money and Markets in a World Without Redemption. And he goes deep into the whole idea of money and how it's connected to faith.
Taylor's analysis is really interesting. He describes money as signs of signs, which means it doesn't have any value on its own. It gets its worth from what we all believe as a society. It's like we all agreed to play this game where these pieces of paper and numbers on a screen have the power to shape our lives.
So like money is kind of a shared illusion that we've all chosen to believe in.
Kinda. And Taylor thinks that maybe we chase wealth so hard because we're trying to avoid the uncertainty and change that's just a part of life. We cling to money to feel safe in a world that's always in flux.
Like we're trying to control things that can't really be controlled.
Yeah. And he says that instead of trying to buy our way out of facing the hard stuff about life and death, we should be confronting those fears and anxieties head on. He thinks true security comes from feeling peaceful and accepting things as they are, not from owning a lot of stuff.
Okay, so we've heard from all these different people, from ancient philosophers to modern thinkers, and it seems like there are two main things to remember when we're trying to define enough.
I agree. It all comes down to our values and our mindset.
Can you unpack that a little more?
Of course. First, we got to figure out what our values are. What's really important to us in life? What do we want our money to help us do? Once we're clear about our values, we can see the difference between what we really need and what we just want, which is often influenced by, what other people are doing and what society tells us to want.
It's like asking ourselves, do we really need that fancy car? Or are we just trying to keep up with the Joneses?
Exactly. And second, it can make a big difference to cultivate a mindset of abundance. Instead of focusing on what we're missing, we can appreciate what we already have and trust that we'll always have enough to take care of ourselves.
It's about shifting from scarcity to gratitude.
I love that. And when we come from a place of abundance, we're less likely to let fear and scarcity control us, and we're more likely to make choices about money that are generous and make us feel good.
This makes me think of Lemkin's point about how younger generations are finding happiness in working less. Maybe they're onto something with their focus on meaning and purpose instead of just money and stuff.
It's definitely possible. Maybe they're showing us a new way to be successful, one that values well-being, connection, and making a difference instead of constantly chasing after more.
And maybe they'll inspire the rest of us to rethink what enough means for us.
I wouldn't be surprised. The journey to a good life, a wealthy good life, is all about figuring out what truly matters to us and then making our lives match that.
It's interesting to think about how these different ideas about enough actually play out in our lives. It's one thing to talk about being content and having enough, but it's harder to actually live that way when we're always being told to want more.
You're so right. It takes real effort to resist those messages and decide what enough means for us. Remember Lynn Twist, she says that feeling like you have enough isn't about depriving yourself or lowering your standards. It's more about recognizing the abundance that's already there and focusing on what you have instead of what you don't.
It's about being grateful for what we already have instead of always reaching for something more.
Exactly. And Twist reminds us that when we feel grateful and appreciate what we have, we actually open ourselves up to receiving even more abundance. It's like that saying, what you focus on expands.
I love that. It's a good reminder to pay attention to our thoughts and beliefs because they really do shape our reality. But honestly, it's tough to stay in that grateful, abundant mindset when we're constantly being told we need more and bigger and better.
It's true. Our culture often tells us that happiness comes from owning things and having a certain status. It can be really hard to ignore those messages and stay true to what we really value.
So how do we do that? How do we resist those pressures and stick to our own definition of enough?
Well, one thing we can do is be more aware of what we're consuming in the media. What are we watching, listening to? Are those things making us feel content and grateful, or are they making us feel like we're not good enough and need more?
Social media especially can be a breeding ground for comparison and envy. It's so easy to get caught up in those perfect little snapshots of other people's lives and feel like we're not measuring up.
Absolutely. We got to remember that those picture-perfect images and captions don't show the whole picture. They're just a tiny glimpse into someone's life. And comparing ourselves to that is a recipe for feeling bad.
So maybe instead of scrolling through social media, we should spend more time connecting with nature or our loved ones or doing things that really feed our souls.
That's a great idea. It's about choosing to do things that match our values and make us truly happy and fulfilled instead of getting caught up in wanting more stuff.
Now let's talk about the practical side of enough. How do we take these ideas and put them into practice in our financial lives?
One helpful tool is to make a budget that reflects our values. It's not just about tracking our money, but about making sure our spending matches what's important to us. Ask yourself, what do I really need? What are the things that bring me the most joy?
It's about spending our money intentionally and making sure it goes towards things that matter to us.
Exactly. And when our budget supports our values, we're more likely to feel good about our finances, even if we're not making a ton of money or living in a fancy house.
And if you need help creating a budget that aligns with your values and goals, check out wealthygoodlife.com. We've got articles, tools, tips, all kinds of stuff to help you take control of your money and create a life you love.
It's a great resource for anyone who wants to learn more about spending, mindfully managing debt, and investing for the future.
Speaking of mindful spending, I think being grateful for what we already have is a big part of feeling like we have enough.
Definitely. Taking a few minutes each day to appreciate the good things in our lives, even the small things, can make a huge difference in how we feel overall.
It's like we're training our minds to see the abundance all around us instead of focusing on what we don't have.
Right. And when we're grateful, we're less likely to feel like we need to buy more things to make us happy. We realize that true happiness comes from within, not from stuff.
Now let's talk about work. It's a big part of life for most people, and it can be a big source of stress, especially when we feel pressured to make more money and climb the career ladder.
That's true. We often connect our self-worth and success to our jobs and how much we earn. But it doesn't have to be that way. If we're not happy or feel burnt out in our work, it might be time to look at our priorities and see if there's something else we could be doing.
Defining enough doesn't have to mean retiring early or becoming a billionaire. It's about finding work that matches our values, our skills, and what we're passionate about.
It's about finding purpose and meaning in what we do, even if it means making less money.
And sometimes changing careers or starting a side hustle can be the key to a more fulfilling and financially secure life.
It's all about balance, right? Maybe it's about asking for more flexibility in our current job, or maybe it's about finally going for that passion project we've been dreaming of.
And who knows, maybe we'll find out that we can actually make more money doing what we love.
It happens all the time. When our work has purpose, it doesn't feel like a chore anymore. It feels energizing and inspiring.
Now let's be real, life doesn't always go perfectly and unexpected things happen. How do we deal with those unexpected expenses and still feel like we have enough and stay financially stable?
That's a great point. That's why it's so important to have an emergency fund. Some money set aside that can help us get through those tough times without messing up our finances.
It's like a safety net that gives us peace of mind knowing we're prepared for whatever comes our way.
Exactly. Whether it's a car repair, a medical bill, or losing our job, having an emergency fund can help us handle those situations without going into debt or feeling completely overwhelmed.
And building an emergency fund doesn't have to be hard. It's about starting small and saving a little bit at a time.
You don't need thousands of dollars right away. Even saving a small amount each week or month can add up over time.
It's about making saving a habit and a priority. Now let's talk about giving. How does giving fit into this whole idea of enough?
Giving back is a powerful way to feel abundant and grateful. When we focus on helping others, we stop thinking so much about what we don't have, and we feel a deeper sense of purpose and connection.
And giving doesn't have to be about donating lots of money. It can be volunteering or sharing our skills or just being kind to someone who needs it.
Absolutely. Even small acts of kindness can make a big difference in the world and bring us more joy and meaning.
Well, let's touch on something that can be a little tricky: inheritance. How do we think about potential inheritances when we're trying to figure out how much is enough?
That's a great question. The important thing to remember is that inheritances aren't guaranteed. We shouldn't rely on them for our financial plan.
It's like that saying, don't count your chickens before they hatch.
Exactly. We need to build our own financial foundation and create a life we love based on our own hard work and resources. And if we do happen to receive an inheritance, it's a chance to think carefully about how we want to use that money in a way that matches our values and our long-term goals.
Maybe it's about investing it, or donating to a cause we care about, or using it to create new opportunities for ourselves and our family.
The key is to be intentional and thoughtful about how we manage that unexpected money, just like we do with our regular income.
As we're talking about all this, I keep thinking about, How like society and different systems can affect how people experience enough. It's not always a fair game out there.
That's a really important point. We can't talk about enough without recognizing that some people face barriers and inequalities that make it harder to get resources, opportunities, even like a sense of self-worth.
Right. Things like discrimination based on race or gender, lack of access to education and healthcare, those can create huge obstacles for people, making it so much harder to achieve financial stability and well-being.
We need to be aware of these issues and support policies and practices that promote fairness and give everyone a chance to succeed. Real wealth isn't just about individuals accumulating more, it's about everyone doing well and having a society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Absolutely. We got to be mindful of our own privileges and biases and how they might be affecting our views. And we need to work to dismantle systems that keep inequality going.
It's really encouraging to see younger generations pushing for social justice and change. They're demanding more equitable systems and challenging those old ideas about success and wealth.
I agree. It's inspiring to see their passion and commitment to creating a more just and sustainable world. And speaking of younger generations, we've talked about this a few times, how they might be redefining enough. It's interesting to think about how their values and priorities could shape the future of work and wealth.
Definitely. They seem to care more about experiences, purpose-driven work, and making a positive impact than previous generations did. They're not as interested in climbing the corporate ladder or getting rich just for the sake of it.
Maybe they're showing us a new way, a more balanced way to live, one that puts well-being, connection, and contribution ahead of just wanting more and more.
It's a beautiful idea, isn't it? And I think it's something we can all aim for, no matter how old we are or how much money we have. We can all decide what enough means for us in a way that matches our values and creates a life that feels meaningful and abundant.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into enough, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. What's one small thing you can do today to make your life more aligned with your own definition of enough?
That's a great question to consider. Maybe it's talking to your family or loved ones about your financial goals and what's important to you. Maybe it's getting rid of clutter to simplify your life and create more space for what truly matters. Or maybe it's donating to a cause you believe in, even a small amount.
The important thing is to take action even if it seems small. Every step we take, no matter how insignificant it might feel, can move us closer to the life we want, a wealthy, good life.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone. We have tons of resources at wealthygoodlife.com to support you on your journey.
We've got articles, tools, calculators, even a forum where you can connect with other people who are exploring these ideas and creating lives filled with purpose and abundance.
So keep exploring, keep learning, and keep creating the life you were meant to live.
Thanks for joining us on the Wealthy Good Life podcast. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.
Until then, live well.